Assassin's Promise by Thomas Woodward. Chapter 69. I lay resting next to an enormous fern that provided shade over the crystalline turquoise waters. Sunlight dappled through the leaves of the fern and fell on my face. I had sated my thirst earlier. Eve had showed me to a clear water spring where I drank my fill. Dipping my toes into the warm waters, I lay there content for the moment, not wanting to think of anything beyond this moment. I closed my eyes and let the sun caress me. A soft wind played through the leaves above me. I tried to push the odd figure in shimmering white robes from my mind. They wore a true gold crown. The cast of the metal was almost milky white. The guide was strange. They had slipped into odd avian and reptilian-like speech. They had stayed immobile, near the edge of the great temple, when I had darted ahead earlier towards the fountain. Part of me wondered if the water nymph I had met had been some sort of test. Eve seemed playful and genuine. I wanted to believe she was like me in some way. But what could her motivations be? She had seemed so happy to help me. Maybe she was the true guide. The figure in white and gold robes had different eyes, nothing like Eve's. They were more ordinary, closer to my own except for their vibrant green color. Perhaps Eve was more than she seemed. How old was she? In truth, I knew nothing about her. Opening my eyes just a crack, I could see the light filtering down above me. I was at one of the highest points of the city, if my guess was right. I remembered the gossamer ghost-like outline as the city spread out below me, before I had touched down to the earth. High above the city rose the immense spires, reaching like grasping tentacles into the sky. I could not see where they ended from my vantage point. Their zenith must be high above the clouds, perhaps almost reaching to the very stars above. How was it that no one had seen or heard of this city? Had it been cloaked to sight here in the center of the desert? I had questions, but no answers. The warm feeling of skin slid next to mine. Opening one eye, I looked over to see Eve laying back beneath the ferns in splendor. Blushing a deep crimson, I averted my gaze as quickly as I could. The image still burned into my mind. Trying my best to relax, I lay there, wondering what to say. How could I extricate myself from the situation safely? Her laugh answered my thoughts and sounded like musical chimes. She was breathing calmly and evenly beside me. A strand of her hair tickled my arm as she moved gently next to me, breathing in and out. "Eddie, are you well? Have you eaten your fill? If you have rested to your liking, we can reunite with your guide. He waits for you now. Or shall we bathe again?" Eve's tone was kind but insistent. Keeping my eyes shut, I responded as best I could, given the circumstances. "Perhaps we could just lay here a little while longer? It has been wonderful relearning how to swim, but you are much better at it than I am, and your endurance is far greater than mine. I would like to rest just a little while longer. Will he wait for us?" "I suppose he will. It has been some time since one of your kind has visited us. I am sorry we did not celebrate your arrival. Had I known, I would have prepared something. But please, be at ease. May I join you in your tour of our city, Eddie?" Eve flashed a knowing smile with a hint of a question in her eyes. With great effort, I kept my gaze locked onto her face. Closing my eyes and turning over, I rose to retrieve the rest of my clothes. They were ratty and weather-worn, but I had washed them out a bit in the pool, and at least now they were a little cleaner. The thought came to me that Eve had asked to follow me onward through the city. My blush deepened when I realized the implication of such a request. Steeling my resolve, I tried to motion over to her while keeping my gaze averted. I realized suddenly how difficult this was going to be. "Why do you not look on me, Eddie? You should not turn your back on me." Eve sounded regal, but spoke softly, barely more than a whisper. "My people have customs. Both men and women normally wear clothes when we are not swimming. I am not used to other customs. Please don't mind me. You are beautiful, and well, I do not want to cause you any discomfort with my presence. Your people are an odd race. Why should we change what is natural? But perhaps it is because you are tethered to the ground. You have never kissed the sky. Above, such things are only a hindrance. Eve spoke with warmth, reassuring me with her tone. An image crashed into my mind. A beautiful woman in flight, arms stretching out, ending in feathers, diving down from the peak of the city. Many human-like figures plummeted around her, bird-like feathers extending beyond their limbs. The vision faded and I turned, startled, looking into Eve's face. She had the same features about her. My breath caught. What I had seen had felt like looking backwards into time, jarring my memory. I had seen a vision when the fever-like state had come over me at the top of the spire in the freezing cold the night before. A vision of figures plummeting and merging with great bronze abominations. The merging of the two entities had flashed like white-hot fire in my mind's eye. I had seen it. I had seen her before. But no, that could not be. Eve stood before me. Perhaps an ancestor of hers then? How far back had the vision taken me? Suddenly unsure of Eve, I began to back away, ever so slightly. Eve saw my hesitation and her features became pained. Her eyes implored me to look at her. She held a great sadness in them. They caught me and held me fast, like a magnet's pull. I turned and looked over to the guide who had led me in this far. The figure stood silent and immobile as a statue, with their back against the great domed wall of the temple. Pulling on my still damp shirt, I moved across the distance between me and the robed figure. As I reached him, he began to move again, leading onwards, past the pool. I hesitated, wanting to look back, wanting to see if Eve had followed me. But cowardice won out, and I continued on, trailing the robed figure. I hoped I had not upset Eve, but the image still stuck in my mind. I was suddenly unsure of her. She had made me feel at ease almost too easily. Doubts began to grow in my mind. What was she hiding from me? After several long minutes, I was sure I was alone again. The strange robed man moved briskly ahead of me, not pausing to make conversation. Only then did I look over my shoulder and Eve was gone from my view. I felt the tinge of loss. Somehow I felt I had blundered the situation. Pulling my gaze back in front of me, I saw a series of great arches that rose perhaps 30 spans into the air. They were single columns of stone that were covered in alien markings from base to crest. Each arch stood alone with no weight to support. The next arch would rise another 20 spans ahead, forming an almost perfect replica of the one we had just passed. This continued as we walked along. I marveled at the intricate carvings into the stone that covered each arch like a living tapestry. The markings varied from one arch to the next. They were the only way I could tell them apart. The geometric measurements of each column of stone was an exact mirror to the rest. As we traveled along, the arches formed a great row. If I was as tall as a giant, I would be able to see through hundreds of them unbroken. A great circular ring of stone capped each of the arches. If you had a tether hundreds of spans long, you could connect each of the arches together. My mind wondered at the purpose of such a feat of architecture. Other than the strange carvings, they seemed to hold no obvious purpose. Perhaps they formed a history of the people who had lived here over the centuries, or maybe they composed an elaborate map. My guide stopped abruptly, raising his arms to the sky, his true gold crown flashing in the bright sun. He stood directly beneath an arch that was seemingly identical to all those beforehand. I realized after a moment he was pointing at something. I hurried to catch up and move next to him, following his outstretched arm's trajectory with my eyes. A series of strange runes covered the underside of the arch. I could barely make out any of the details. There was an image of what looked like water parting, being evenly divided by a wavy series of lines. We had followed a sloping descent through the city, walking under the arches. The stones glimmered with a metallic cast. Looking around us, I realized we had climbed down from the central rise where the great dome stood at the very heart of the city. A small narrow street ran off into the distance from our current position. The city was enormous, and I feared I could lose myself in the winding streets without knowledge of how to reach my destination. A myriad of adobe houses rose from the streets surrounding the great arches. Where the stone arches led, a great clearing had been made for them. What possible purpose could they have held? Look above us. Look and see. The arches tell a story for those with the patience to learn it. They are our power and our greatest pride. They hold all knowledge of our people. The figure's voice had taken on a toneless quality, like the dry gust of an ancient tome speaking directly to me. His eyes danced like green fire, but his face remained impassive. I could see the man mouthed each word carefully, almost possessively, before speaking. His head twitched uncontrollably while he spoke, moving unnaturally all the while. The white gold of his crown shimmered with a greenish cast, before returning to its original color again. What is it I'm meant to see? I appreciate the food and rest, but I cannot stay here indefinitely, I said. You are meant to see the Great Divide. When change happened, you are a guest here, and we must honor you. I will help guide you home. But first, you must know of our past. A musical voice spoke behind me, the feminine voice familiar. I turned to see Eve looking at me with a look that was both ancient and beautiful. Then she smiled shyly, remaining behind me a few paces. She moved back behind a columned arch with a timidity that gave her a gentle grace. My eyes followed her flowing silver hair and ran down to her shoulder before catching the curve of her hip. Holding my gaze fast, I spoke as best I could. It would be wonderful to have you as my guide. Please stay with me. I did not mean to frighten you off earlier. I felt gooseflesh all over me, not wanting to lose sight of her again. Like a wisp of steam, I feared I would lose her at any moment. I felt incredibly childish, and I didn't care a whit. What you saw when you straddled the very city itself in darkness, the story images of our people, they have come to you already. Seeing your eyes, I know this. We are the Siender. Our people have dwindled and died over the many years. You saw my sister, Amail, before she dove and became one with the Fordal. They are the ancestors of those you call Watchers. Their power is steeped in the passages of time. A great tragedy happened here over a millennia, now gone to dust. Many of our people perished. Please come with me. I will take you to the Great Dome. Please stay. Eve looked at me meaningfully. Her face betrayed the depth of emotion she felt. I wanted to stay with her, to make things right somehow. I don't know why I felt this way. A strand of silver hair blew into her eyes as the wind shifted, and she brushed it away with a perfect finger. Her deep amber eyes drew me in like great pools of burnished metal. I could not pierce their depths. I nodded numbly. With a whisper, she drew her slender arm out to me, beckoning me forward. The raw intensity was almost too much for me to handle. She stood there naked, perfect. Her majesty spread out around her like a halo. The rough stone columns fell away behind her. I felt a cool palm on my shoulder as the robed man moved next to me. In hushed tones, he spoke just clearly enough for me to hear his words. Remember that we are not of you people. We will always remember and honor you, for yours is a great people. Our city was a gift from your people to us long ago. We cherish it, but were unable to protect it through the ages. For that we weep with regret. It was ever a beautiful gift. Please forgive us." The strange man stepped away lightly, leaving me unsure how to feel. His message had come urgently and without warning. What had been an uncertain landscape became a place of wonder. My fear drained away as through a sieve. I had held great worry over what crimes Stanton had committed, and was unsure if I would be held accountable in his stead. How odd to be treated as an honored guest. It felt as though a great weight had been removed from my shoulders. I had been waiting unconsciously all this time for the hammer to fall. With more vigor, I fell in beside Eve as we made our trek back towards the great temple. There I would meet the remnants of her people. I wondered if they all held a similar form, or if they had avian attributes, like those I had glimpsed in the dream vision. The slope of her shoulder fell away to her supple waist, and my mind had trouble concentrating on the matter at hand. She squeezed my hand in hers as she led me onward. I trembled in a wave of nervous apprehension of what was to come.